Hello and welcome to the flip side of adversity. I am Dr. Veirdre Jackson, the CEO and creative behind Living Strong Consulting. So let me ask you a question. How would you access uncompromised joy? How do you actually stay connected to your purpose when the work of healing and growing can actually leave us feeling exhausted? So the truth is that hard work is hard work, but it's the key to transformation. And we're actually talking about that in this episode. We're actually diving deep into the hard work of heart work. It's a matter of the soul. Because if we're going to do heart work, the real change starts inside when we're willing to embrace our flaws, cultivate our self awareness, and actually lean into compassion, even the compassion for ourselves. We don't just heal ourselves, we actually create space for deeper connection, for understanding, and a collective transformation. If you're ready to actually do the work, step into healing and unlock the power of your purpose, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Trauma, toxic stress, broken habit, and hurting heart don't define destiny, but peace isn't passive. It requires an exchange. To create a flip and access peace in the middle of the pieces, you are challenged to make an exchange of the lies that have kept you mentally hostage in basement moments. Resilience isn't about bouncing back, but bouncing forward. Living Strong, the flip side of adversity, brings powerful stories and fearless conversations from experts in the field of business, relationships, emotional, physical, and mental health, and faith-based communities. Each episode creates a brave space with powerful tools from authentic connections. Tune in as we dig in with Dr. Jackson on the flip side of adversity. Welcome again to the flip side of adversity. I'm so excited to have this conversation with this powerful woman who happens to also be my soror. I know y'all are just like, how many swords is she going to have on? I can't help it that we are dynamic women of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Yeah.
I can't help it that we're dynamic, but besides that amazing fact, I am excited to have someone who is so passionate about the heart work that she does and her commitment to helping, supporting, and helping others transform or walk through their transformation. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Sabriya Jubilee. She is a servant leader, a bridge builder, and a systems thinker dedicated to equity education and soul restoration. She is committed to dismantling systemic oppression, reimagining education, and fostering spiritual and personal growth. Guided by faith and purpose, Dr. Jubilee believes true transformation begins at the soul level, where we embrace our truest selves, walk in purpose, and experience uncompromised joy. Welcome to the flip side of adversity, Dr. Jubilee.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jackson. I'm so honored to be here and to be in space with you today.
So we're going to drop the formalities. I'm going to be Veirdre. She's going to be Sabriya, but
Yes,
I've already shared your receipts, so just
that's
recognize.
right.
But let's jump right into it because I use this word often, heart work.
hmm
Oftentimes, when I am working with clients or even starting a presentation, I will let them know that the work that I'm getting ready to share with them is my heart work. And you decided to title this episode in helping us understand that there is hard work connected to heart work,
hmm
but it starts in the soul. So I'd like us to just start off by really kind of unpacking, what does heart work actually mean to you, and how is it different from traditional work or growth?
So thank you first, just for having me here. I'm just excited to be in space. When I think about hard work and the way that I originally started processing this
Mhm.
came about through my profession. I've been an educator for some time, and it goes all the way back to my junior year. So, what many people don't know about me, if you haven't known me before I entered the education space, I was in the world of agricultural production. So, I have a bachelor's degree in animal and poultry sciences, and those who knew me then just knew for sure when they heard Dr. Jubilee, I was a veterinarian. And I did do some work in that
Mm.
space, but in my junior year of college, where I was really in a space of trying to understand what my purpose was. Why had God created me? What am I here to do? What was revealed to me was that, yes, the science of animals is something you know, and it's something you love, and it's something you can do, but it's not the space where the transformation of why you've been placed on earth is going to actually take residence. And so it was in this realm of the black community. I was raised in a very black pride home of black pride, and my parents were always about making sure that I understood that, yes, there is a story of trauma that comes along with our blackness, but that is not the
Mm.
totality of our existence. And there is
Mhm.
so much more victory and that can happen through you because of where you come from.
Mhm.
Education is a portal. And so I sort of moved my professional world, even though I did finish my academic credentials and worked for the USDA for some time and did all of those things. I really sought purpose in education and using that as a vehicle to support the Black community
Mm.
and elevating ourselves out of all of the conditions of oppression. And what I realized that was, for all of the forerunners, all of our ancestors, the people who came before us, those that are notable and those who names will never be known, the reason why they were able to sit in those seats and take all of that was because there was a heart transformation that they knew needed to happen. And so when I think about the world of equity and all of the things, we're in a world now where those things are under attack. For me, the hard work really came in to understand that before I can do anything to change a condition for another person, I have to understand that we are connected at the soul level, and that the real ability to dismantle oppression, for one, starts with the matter of the soul. You got to
Yes.
know that we are one. And if I have hatred toward you, there's no way that I can see liberation for myself. And so
Yes.
that was the start of that for me. And
Mhm.
so it gets down to, who has God created us to be as beings? That starts with the matter of the heart. We
Mhm.
can't love the Lord thy God without our heart, soul, and mind, and then despise our neighbor. It
Mhm.
just doesn't exist.
Right.
And so when I think about heart work, that's where it originates.
There's so much. Literally, we could have a book, a whole podcast just off of the answer to the first question. But you touched on something that I feel like the Lord put in my heart to pull apart earlier in this week. And I'd love for you to actually, from your lens of what you just shared, there's a difference from doing things because you're gifted
Mhm,
and you have a talent for it, compared to actually tapping into purpose.
mhm,
And I've watched people, one, wrestle with that word, be afraid of that word, feel like that word is too elusive. But I've also watched people get confused and stuck because they're good at something and they just keep doing it
mhm.
when there's something bigger. Could you, from your lens, help that person who is actually feeling stuck? They're like, I'm good at this, but I'm not sure. How do you pull apart the difference between your talent and your purpose?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a big question.
You let me there.
Yeah, but it's a big question. Okay, so I'm going to answer it in two parts.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll start with when I came into that understanding
Mhm.
for myself. So I just shared the journey. I was in my junior year of college. I went to Virginia Tech, and we had the Virginia Maryland Regional Veterinary Hospital or School on our campus. And one of the veterinarians came to our junior seminar, and he said, if you want to go to veterinary school because you love animals, don't apply. He said, you have to love the science of animals. And so by that
Mhm.
point, I understood that I was gifted in the science. I have a scientific brain. I still think that way today, and it has served me well. But I wasn't passionate about the science in that way. The way that God used that was that He used science to help me understand, so as it is in heaven, it is in earth.
Mhm.
And then in the earth realm, there are things that you need to do with your spiritual experience to change the human condition.
Yeah.
I was afraid of that because obviously I'm a first generation graduate from college. I went to Virginia Tech pretty much on full scholarship, bless the Lord.
Mhm.
So to turn around and tell my family, okay, y'all, I'm going to take a different approach. My father in particular was not too fond of that.
Mhm.
But I knew that there was something greater. And, he trusted his daughter enough to know that I wouldn't make frivolous decisions, which is why I finished the bachelor's degree in
Mhm.
animal and poultry science. And side note, I might need to go into that poultry science with these eggs.
Hey,
So,
hey, a whole
okay,
truth.
the whole price of
Oh,
eggs, I'm getting ready to get me a chicken coop in the backyard. But that's a whole nother thing.
that's a whole nother thing,
But
but
there's a
it's
there's
true.
a piece about that. So I was a Ronald E. McNair scholar,
Mhm.
and I used that program on our campus as sort of
Mhm.
my way to see if this was where the Lord wanted me to go. And before I
Mhm.
submitted my application, I prayed to God and I said, if I am not to transition like literally my
Mhm.
entire life's work into
Mhm.
what I think you're calling me to, do not let me get into the program. Submitted my application. The weeks went on. I got my application, my letter back, and I was walking through, and I literally remember this was one of the very few times where I heard an audible voice of
Mhm.
God.
Mhm.
I was walking through the parking lot. I opened the letter. Congratulations, you've been entered into the Ronald E. McNair Scholars. And I was like, Lord, am I really supposed to do this? He said, didn't you ask me to say, if you weren't supposed
Mhm.
to do this, not to let you get in?
Mhm.
And it wasn't one of those, it was like, that's not in my train of thought.
Mhm.
You are confirming this for me. So on the one hand, I think there are moments where if you are, if there's a tug in your spirit, lean into and just follow the pathway. Trust God with the big questions
Mhm.
because He will be sure to answer them and then move from that space.
Mhm.
The second way I would answer that is that I have one of my preacher friends, she always says that when you have a righteous burden about something, that thing that
Mhm.
just won't leave you alone, that no matter where you go, what you engage in, you find yourself drawn to it,
Mhm.
that's also an indication that's your
Mm.
call.
Yes, it won't leave you alone. And I feel in my soul, you just spoke to somebody and they're like, okay.
Mhm.
They just said, okay. In all everything that you have shared already, there is a consistent element of developing self awareness
Mhm.
and the ability to strengthen that and being able to have that self awareness guide you. And I would even lean in to also go back to something you said at the top, not only the self awareness piece, but understanding your self worth so that I also can then give you the margin, someone else, to actually operate in their worth as well. When you think about the journey of self awareness
Mhm.
and that developmental process, what would you say is why is that such an important piece to actually being effective
Mhm.
in what you are calling your purpose?
That's a good question. If there's no way that we can work in support of, in the lives of
Mm.
other people before we know ourselves. Because every single element of what someone else is
Yeah.
journeying through, we have to first experience it. As a preacher of the gospel, the word has to minister to you first. You cannot stand
Mm.
in a pulpit and rightly divide
Mhm.
any
Mhm.
piece of
Mhm.
text that the Lord hasn't first dealt with you on. And that doesn't always mean you have to have the identical experience,
Yeah.
but it does mean that you need to be so in tune with where you are, who
Mhm.
God has called you to be, what you struggled through, because that allows us to see the humanity in other people. And I had to
Mhm.
learn that. So, folks that
Mm.
know me well will probably say that I am one who sometimes lacks patience. Right. And ironically,
She's self-aware.
right? Ironically, my name's Sabriya, which is Arabic for patience.
Okay.
So my mother and father must have known
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
about who
Mhm.
was coming into the world. And the way I describe it is I have a low tolerance for foolishness.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. But over time, I have had to
Mm.
learn that people don't think like you and they won't move the way that you move. Uh, and that doesn't make you better.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need to hear from other people. Sometimes it is the opposite thing that pushing against that gets you to recognize where
Mhm.
you are. And then it gives you an opportunity to engage and see compassion in others. Like God created everybody, not just you. And those are sometimes the hard talks that I have with myself. Like, yeah, he created everybody.
But that could be a really vulnerable place for leaders.
Yes.
And as a leader, I've often, as I've coached leaders and worked with entrepreneurs who want to create impact, there's an element of recognizing you must be willing to be very clear on your strengths, your areas of growth, and even the things that are literally flaws. But so often people are running from that. And
Mhm.
how does that sabotage effectiveness when we know it's
Mhm.
a vulnerable process? So when you think about that vulnerability, what message would you give to leaders who are like, I can't be vulnerable in front of my staff. I have to be the strongest one in the room. I've literally heard that. So what would you say to those leaders?
That's a complex question, only because I've journeyed
Let
through.
me see. Let me get comfortable in my seat.
I've journeyed through this. So I've come from two different angles of that.
Mhm.
One, that as a leader, what I've learned, whether it's formal leadership or informal leadership, and I probably learned that lesson more from informal leadership,
Mhm.
where people have seen me as a person of influence.
Mhm.
But I'm like, I'm just like y'all. I don't know why y'all. I don't know the answer to this either. Like I don't. But for some folks, what I've recognized is that once people see you like that, there is a
Mhm.
part of them that wants to know that you can hold on.
Yes.
Right. So what I've learned from folks is like, and I've had a couple friends say this to me, like when you break down, because I do have moments where I break down, it makes us nervous
Mm.
because we're used to you having it together. And then I have to say to them, well, I don't always have it. Uh, but what it did for me was made me recognize that there is a certain calling in the way that I've been
Yes.
crafted that does require that. So I think in the one hand, there is a space where as a leader, you do need to maintain some form of foundation. And the way
Yeah.
that I would encourage folks to do that is to try your best to think about facts and faith over the fear.
Mm. Mhm.
Literally in
Mhm.
this season of life, that's what I've had to continuously tell myself so that when I
Mhm.
get before any team that I'm responsible for supporting, facts and faith over fear.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is I've also been told that you shouldn't wear your heart on your sleeve as a leader. And I don't necessarily ascribe to that either, because then what that does for leaders is it doesn't allow leaders to be human. It
Right.
doesn't allow leaders to see other people in the room and
Mhm.
recognize that your positionality as being the one who sits in whatever seat, being vulnerable doesn't compromise that.
Right.
Actually, what it does is allows people to draw closer to you
Yes.
because they see more of themselves in you by letting yourself be shown.
Mhm.
And I've found that when I have operated in that more egotistical, because that's what that's grounded in,
Well.
mantra notion that somehow or another I am built from Teflon,
Mhm.
everything falls apart.
Mm.
It has been those
Mhm.
moments where I've looked at people and said, I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
that we've been able to collectively come together. And I come from servant leadership.
Mhm.
So that model of like, you can't ask anyone to do anything, go anywhere, or do anything that you're not willing to do yourself or haven't already been. So there's always that piece that's at work. But I would encourage any leader that's listening that if you find yourself being in a space where you can't be vulnerable with the people that you lead, then you're not really doing a service to the work.
Yes. And it also doesn't allow them. I was having this conversation with a leader who literally shared back that I have to always have it together. And I said, in some respects, if you are always presenting yourself as always together, Teflon, you can't make a mistake, you're actually sending a message to your team that they can't either.
Hmm.
And so then unintentionally, you're sending this fear out because then they're afraid of not living up to all of the things that you are. And it literally can create that sabotage and people become paralyzed
Yeah.
to
And
grow.
it stops people from taking risk too.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
found like the greatest creativity comes when folks feel like they can stretch. My greatest creativity comes when I feel like I can stretch and take the risk and try new things without, and I always describe it like this, like the fatality of the mistake. When
Mm-hmm.
mistakes feel fatal, you're not there's no growth. There's
Mm-hmm.
no growth. You get compliance at best.
Right. And for those people who are reading the book, let them. I know there's
Hmm.
a whole team, my FYS, Find Your Strength team, were reading the book together. There's a portion in the book where Mel Robbins says, when you're sitting in that moment, is this going to matter tomorrow, a month from now, a year
Mm.
from now? And we will sit in that moment, in that mistake, and get paralyzed. And I just think that that is such a practical way of like shaking yourself up and recognizing you've got to go on.
Hmm.
This isn't going to matter in a month, in a week, really, especially if you are operating from a place of integrity consistently. Yeah.
Ooh, that's powerful. Ooh, that's powerful. And my coach recommended the book. I have it on Audible. I haven't listened to it yet, but it's a
Yeah.
movement.
It's a movement. It
Hmm.
is a movement. I did struggle with it a little bit initially, and I told my group that it took me about page 72 where she acknowledged that there are situations in which um, the opportunity to recognize the let them is not allowing someone to continue to oppress or treat you wrong, but in that moment your strength is actually in your silence,
Mm.
and you then shift your energy to, now let me, now what am I going, now that this person has shown me who they are, what they are going to do, what am I now going to do? And so that energy shifted it for me, and I was like, okay,
Okay.
I'm going with this, I'm going with that, I'm in the movement, I'm in the
You're in the
movement.
movement.
But when you think about those things that paralyze people, it can become an obstacle.
Mhm.
What have you found as you've coached and worked with and led teams? What are some of the biggest obstacles that keep people from actually doing that introspective work?
So I think the first thing you've named it is that fear of making mistakes and that
Mhm.
those mistakes won't allow them a chance to grow. I think, particularly depending on how people have been reared and what leadership is, if you see leadership as being transactional,
Mm.
where it's like, I am the authority figure and what I say goes, and you don't really get to question that, it will prevent folks from moving forward. But then there's that transformational side where it builds a healthy respect for the positionality and the
Mhm.
cost of what it means to sit in the seat while still offering that respect and distributive leadership to other people. So I feel like when folks know that there can be a stretch and a reach, they're more likely to break through those barriers and be more introspective. It reminds me though, so I learned how to do that. I didn't know I was being taught that from my mother.
Oh.
So I grew up in a Black household. I had a Black mama who was real serious about discipline. Okay. Very
I too.
serious.
I too. Yes.
But the thing I appreciated about my mother, she understood her children.
Mhm.
And so, as her firstborn, she knew that just the thought of her being disappointed in me was enough to shake me up.
Mhm.
But what she would do is make me go sit down. And she would literally say, go sit down and pull yourself together and think about what you're doing.
Mhm.
And then, in order to be free from the steps or the bed or wherever I had to go confine myself to, I had to come back to her with rhyme and reason for what I was doing. And so early on, she was teaching me one about getting clear about your emotion, like what's happening, because you are outside of yourself, and I need you to self-regulate before I have to regulate. And
Mhm.
I would prefer to self-regulate before
Yes.
she had to
Yeah.
regulate.
A whole nother situation.
Yes. And then it taught me accountability. And I
Mhm.
think that coupled with my father, because my dad was always the type that was like, you could do whatever you want as long as you understand the consequence that comes along with that. So my answer to them could never be, I didn't know. I could
Yes.
say, I did it because I wanted to. I wanted to be disobedient. Whatever it was, I could say it as long as I understood that there might be a reaction to that action. And so I think those early days, now as a child, I didn't realize that's what they were doing. And I don't even know if they knew that intentionally that's what they were doing. But it is what I learned over time to be more accountable and be more in tune with myself, with my actions. That people don't just say things. Sometimes we say, oh, I didn't mean that. Yes, you
Yes, you
did.
did.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Sabriya, yes, you
Mhm.
did. And you need to
Mhm.
be honest with yourself first so you can be honest with the other person. It hurt their feelings. Well, that was the point. That's why you said it.
Mhm.
Now, we don't always want to verbalize that, but it's the truth.
Right.
And I think, and I'm not nowhere near a master in this. I mean,
We're
there's an
human,
evolution, right?
right?
But I do try my best to get more in tune with, like, why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why did you react that way? To hold myself accountable. And
Yeah.
then that gives me an opportunity to have those kinds of conversations with folks that I'm in leadership with. So that goes back to the question of, like, how do people become more vulnerable? Like, once we have that relationship that
Mhm.
says, like, that came from a place, let's talk about where that came from. You don't have to admit it all. It's just up to you to decide what you want to share. But once we get to a point where we can have that dialogue, then we can course correct, and it builds greater
Mhm.
community.
You have continued to bring stuff that I have. It's not even on the script, y'all. I'm trying so hard to stick with the script. I actually think about when you talked about Black moms, the things we have learned. When one of our sorors actually wrote a blog entry to talk about the physical ailment and impact on our physical condition as Black women who have to stay strong
Mm.
in spaces, in systems, um, in not allowing ourselves to feel vulnerable. We have to, like, the strength, we wear it like a cape or a shield,
Mhm.
and it is literally killing us.
Mhm.
When you think about why are we as Black women sometimes the women who have, like, being strong is like our medal, and it's killing us. And I ask that because oftentimes in my trauma work, I will reach back into, where is your stress at this point that was the thing you decided to stay?
Mm.
Or that was a thing you did because the cap is too tight.
Mhm.
And that response, yes, you're regretting it in this moment, or you're continuing to spiral, but it actually goes back to, you've not given yourself any margin to reset.
Mhm.
When you think about women of color, why are we in such a place? What are the factors that are impacting us to be in such a place that we've got to be the strongest person in the room all the time? All the time?
All the time. Not all the time.
All the time.
I mean, I think it draws back to what we know.
Mhm,
We are living the fruit of the seeds that were planted during chattel slavery,
mhm,
where it was for survival,
mhm.
not to allow yourself to crack. And thank the Lord for the ones who were able to travail through that time,
Yeah,
because we are
we
a
are.
result of their survival. I was raised under the mantra of you need to be twice as good for half the credit.
Me too.
And I didn't
I
realize
remember that. No, I remember the
verbal,
verbal lesson that
yes,
this is who you have to be.
yes. Yes, and I will say is that sort of you don't, this is a terrible mantra, but it makes sense right now. You don't
Mhm.
throw the baby out with the bathwater
Right,
type of thing,
right.
where there are reasons why
Mhm,
those lessons had to be taught. And had it not been for the generations teaching that and modeling that, you and I would not
mhm,
be able to sit
mhm.
here as credentialed and as free and liberated as we are working to be. And at the same time, we are still living in those oppressive systems that teach us that if you don't show up in a particular way,
Mhm,
somehow or another, who you are will be in question.
mhm,
It is the sister circle that I think
mhm.
really helps me
That was gonna be
recognize
my question.
mhm,
Mhm.
that there's space in place to be vulnerable. You can't let everybody see that.
Right.
It is sometimes dangerous
Mhm,
to let the
mhm,
adversary know
mhm,
where your weaknesses lie.
mhm,
That's why the scripture is very clear about tucking away in God.
mhm,
Like, take
mhm,
your cares to the Lord, leave them in that space. Your enemies don't really need to
mhm,
know what you're struggling with, but your
mhm.
safe zone, your
Yes.
sister circle, your family, your village, that's where you can kind of leave those spaces. And I feel saddened for women, in
Mm,
particular, Black women who don't have
mm,
those sister circles and those spaces of vulnerability. And it's interesting that this comes up because obviously in this world that we're living in now,
mhm,
and my profession is tied to this to some degree, but I was at an event for work. I'll share this really quickly. And this was one of those moments where I didn't realize I was holding it.
mm,
So we were at an event, and there was a young student, young black student, black girl, who was singing both the national anthem and then the black anthem, black national
mhm,
anthem. She started off with the first one, and I was kind of like, I'm a stand, but that's about all
mhm,
y'all gonna get from me today.
mhm,
Then she went into the black national anthem,
mhm.
and I was singing along with her, and I think I probably hit lift every voice and sing, and
Mhm.
tears just started rolling down my
Yeah.
face. And I was in the, I mean, I'm in a professional space, so I'm like, you're not
Yes,
okay.
yes, you're not
You're about to crack.
okay.
You're about to
You're
crack.
not
So I
okay.
was trying my best to hold it in and be in tune. But what I realized was like, you've been, and this was the
Mm.
first time that I was able to breathe, but it was like not relief. It
Mhm,
was sadness. It
mhm.
was like, here, this song has been written 100 years
Mm.
ago for the folks who have been singing it for the reasons why they needed
Mhm.
to. And here we are still having to
Mhm,
sing this and it
mhm,
have meaning. Now, good thing
mhm.
she stopped after the first verse. Because if she had hit Stony the Road We Tried
Oh,
or God of Our Weary Years, I
what
probably
took
would have
us
started
out,
hollering in the place. But
right?
it was one of those moments where I was like, you got to
Mhm.
check in. And then I had some sisters that I could reach out
Yeah.
to, and they allowed me to get it out, and we moved on.
Yes.
But
So your key go-to in those to restore or refill yourself are other healthy relationships that you've established. Are there any other things that you do? Being in so many important, significant rooms, being so credentialed, are there? I know that there's a level of pressure that comes with that
mhm.
naturally. Are there other things that you do to help you continue to stay as effective as you are?
Well, I take it to the Lord. Like at the end of the
Mhm,
day, at the
mhm,
beginning of the day, it's me and the
mhm,
Lord. For God I live,
mhm,
for God I die. Like
mhm.
I'm like, okay, Lord, your humans are down here acting up.
You're
That's how I talk to God. I
I
don't know.
love it. I
I
love
like
it.
your
You're
humans are
humans.
down here acting up, and I need you to come and get
Yes,
them or
yes.
come get me or whatever. But this needs to stop. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I do go
Mhm,
to that place. It's the secret place.
mhm,
It is the place, and I have to go back to my mama. I'm gonna keep talking about my
mhm.
mama because I love my
Yes,
mama.
yes.
My mother is no longer here in the
Mhm.
physical realm, but she's so very much alive in my life, the
Mhm.
life of my brother and my family. But my mother was the one who really taught me about the sovereignty of God. Like,
Mm.
she helped me understand through her own battle. She had metastatic breast cancer in 1996, 97, when all
Okay.
kinds of treatment was still very new and chemotherapy was very hard.
Mhm.
And she had a very aggressive form of cancer. But the day that she was diagnosed, which was March of 96, I'll never forget it. We were sitting on the step outside of our home, and she was basically like, it doesn't have to be this cancer that takes me out of here. I could walk across the street and get hit by a bus if that's what the Lord has.
Mhm.
What you need to understand is that God is sovereign and his will is supreme. And
Mm.
as long as you abide in his will, he will take care of the things that concern you. Life is much bigger than just who you are and what you want. And
Mhm.
we all are crafted with a purpose.
Mm.
Sometimes that purpose is fulfilled in 38 years, which was when she
Mhm.
passed. Sometimes it's 97, which was my great grandmother, her grandmother.
Mhm.
And so, in all of that, though, that's my source. And
Yeah.
then from that, he's allowed me to expand to people,
Yeah.
sister circle, and a good brotherhood. I do have a good brotherhood.
Mhm.
My father is alive and well in my life. And so the village does take care of me.
That is so powerful. When I read your flip side story, I realized that we had that in common.
Mm,
Um, my mother passed when I was 17,
mm,
in 88.
mm,
And again, that season, like they did not have the technology that they have now. So it was life shattering for me to actually watch um, the cancer take her. But she also was this force. Like I to this day, I'm still trying to figure out how was she in court all day. She came home, we all had food, the house wasn't a mess. Like how did she do
do it.
these
Hmm.
things? But the legacy that she implanted in me. I was asked to speak at a Juneteenth event, and I looked back through old clippings because both of my parents are gone, and I'm from the South, so I'm here. I've been here for over 30 years, but this isn't where I originated.
Hmm.
So I have to actually look through things. And I realized I found this picture of my great grandmother who was 14 teaching in a one-room schoolhouse
Mm,
on our we had originally church at the time, but it was a farming community that had figured out how to create a school. And then my mother's desire to build a school right at the time in which the cancer was diagnosed. And it, for, I don't know. And I laughed with my husband. I was like, I'm slow. Like, how did I not catch that this was imprinted on me,
mm,
impacting young people, impacting communities, standing for what's right was literally passed down woman by woman. What do you hope your legacy
ooh,
is as you think about how you are impacting others and how your mother has impacted you?
mm. So, my late godfather,
Hmm.
Bishop Joseph C. Aiken Sr., used to sing this song: "If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain." That's literally all I want. That somehow, in some way, my interaction with another individual has helped them to understand that they are loved, well resourced, and God has created them for greatness. Whether that is a formal process that I do in some professional way, or really my encounter. Like, it pains me, as hard as I am, and as much as I'm a Philadelphian, and I come from that, it really does pain me when people say that I've hurt them.
Oh,
It does.
yeah.
It really does. Because that's not my intention. That's not my
Mhm.
desire. I know what it's like to be hurt. And so I never want to inflict that on another person.
Mhm.
So for me, it is this moment of, if something I did can draw you into a space of greater love for yourself, greater love for other people, and most importantly, greater love for God, then I've
Mm.
done what I've been sent here to do.
Yeah.
And it's a question I often ask myself regularly, because I do think, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but losing my mother, I was 14
Mhm.
when she passed. My brother was 4. She was 38. It created a sense of urgency
Mhm.
in a being that was already ambitious,
Yes.
that didn't allow me to rest in the work. I'm just really learning how to rest in who I am at 42, because it was that thing of like, I could die tomorrow and I want to make it count.
Why are you revealing again? I must be like slow when you just said that.
Yeah.
When I lost her at 17, there became this urgency in everything she had told me. I remember at 12, I was feeling myself. And I remember she knew. I was like, I'm the peacock. And
Mhm.
she said, your beauty will attract people to you, but it will be your intellect that keeps you in the room. And your
Mm.
beauty can fleet in a moment. You have got to figure out how to operate with a level of intellect
Mm.
that you will hold spaces. I remember that at 12. And there was, when she was gone, oh, you opened that to me. Oh my goodness. There was a sense of
Mhm.
urgency that I did not allow myself to settle into. Veirdre, you're okay? Until my late 40s. Now I'm closer to 60 now. But
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
just allowing my there was a fast pace, there was college, there was, and I have to excel. I've got to
Keep it moving.
keep it moving.
Yeah. And what I realized, I didn't realize I was embodying that as like an unsettling. I just thought I was ambitious and goal oriented. And I think to other people it read the same, until I started getting more introspective and really asking God to do more heart work on me
Yes.
to understand where that was coming from. Because what I was finding, and I don't often admit this, but I'm getting ready to say it now.
Mm.
What I was finding is that no matter how many accomplishments I
Come through.
gained, I never experienced the joy of it.
Come
It
through.
was like a checkbox. All right, let's go get to the next thing. And then when I would allow myself to be happy, it was always this back of the mind of like, now the turmoil is getting ready to come.
Mm.
Now the impending doom is getting ready to settle in. So it
Yes.
was probably the last 2 years. And I have to, I can share this quick
Yes.
story. So last year, was that last year? Yeah, we're celebrating year 2. So in 23, when I became a member of our illustrious sorority,
Yes.
I came into that year before I
Mhm.
even knew that this was going to be an opportunity for me, coining that year as my year of joy.
Mm.
Okay. So that was the top of
Yes.
January. And I was like, I'm going to be intentional about living in the moment, about taking myself out of the box that I had placed myself in, allow myself to be and feel. And some of that would come with mistakes. Some of that would come with the things that people might look at me and clutch their pearls a little bit about, because they didn't know that this is what, even with all the titles, right? Because those things can get in the way. That Dr. Jubilee, that Pastor Jubilee, that
Mhm.
stuff can trip you up if you're not very careful about it.
Mhm.
There's a responsibility, right?
Yes.
We don't get to just be frivolous with these
Right.
things, and there's an accountability attached to them.
Mhm.
And we still can live. And
Yes.
sometimes in the church,
Mhm.
okay, y'all, we don't always give ourselves and our leaders an opportunity to have that level of freedom, but we're going to talk about that at a different time.
That's a whole nother
It's a whole nother
podcast. Whole
podcast.
nother podcast.
But what I coined this year my year of joy. And then I came through our organization
Mhm.
and my line name became Joyful Noise.
Oh,
I didn't know.
you were living
I
it.
was living it. I was embodying it. And that entire year was like that. When people would see me, they're like, "You're so excited about being a part of the organization." I'm like, I hope you know that just being affiliated with the organization is not what this is. This
Mm,
is me living out what I committed to God a long time ago. And I feel like He's saying to me now, thank you for your obedience. Thank you for your sacrifice. I'm going to allow you to experience the desire of your heart because you've aligned it to my will. I can
mm,
trust you in this space now.
yes.
Or you can
Yes.
trust yourself in this space because you
Mhm,
abide in me now. You might
mhm,
not have been able to do that had you done it a little earlier in your life because I had to
mhm.
take you through some things so you could understand the responsibility of this. But
Yeah.
this is your year of joy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you confirmed for me as they have heard me say over and over again, because I too, I did not realize how many things about our lives were aligned.
Yeah.
So the actual quaking for me happened in 2008. I literally lost my mind. Everything fell apart.
Mm,
And it was literally me trying to run away from God, but in his love would not let me go and kept I just walked my way back, physically walked my way back into a place of sanity through sermons, through literally walking. But on the other side of that, I
mm,
declared joy.
mhm,
And so when you placed in the description one of the keys or one of the outcomes from this journey is uncompromised joy.
mhm.
I'll say she's my sword. This is what
We're kindred
yes, we're
spirits.
kindred spirits.
Yes.
What does uncompromised joy mean? Like, what does it look like?
Mm. I used to think that joy was just the happy feelings, the
Mhm.
elation,
State of
the
being.
state of being. But what I recognize now is that joy is really about the disposition of the heart. Being
Mm.
able to, yes, experience the jubilation and the exhilaration that comes from feeling those happy feelings, but it is also being able to see in trauma, in
Mm.
pain, that there is opportunity for growth. Being able to look at a situation and ask God the question of, what is it you want me to get from here?
Yeah.
Like, this thing isn't assigned to kill me because your word is very clear. I think thoughts to prosper you, to give you a hope in a future and expect it in. And there has to be joy with
Yes.
expected ends.
Right.
So what is it that you want me to learn from this? This moment is happening and it doesn't feel good. Like
Mhm.
unexplainable, or that joy that's locked in gives you a chance to say, I don't really like this.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel good to my being. And yet I know you're going to do something with it. So I'm going to smile and worship and praise now in the thick of it. Like we say that sometimes, like we sing those songs. Don't wait till the battle is over. Shout now. Because you know in the end you're going to win. But when you have to live, that makes
Mhm.
me think of Derek. Like all these songs are rolling
Mhm.
through my head, right?
Mhm.
When the music stops and I have to live the life I sing about, that's when
Yes.
you can experience that
Yes.
uncompromised joy.
Uncompromised joy
Mm-hmm.
and being able to have a heart posture that allows you even in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And I feel for someone, even in this moment,
Mm.
there is still purpose, there is still opportunity.
Yes.
And with a heart posture of joy and recognizing, you said it, that God is actually trusting you with this moment. What will you do with it
Mm.
to glorify Him?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I cannot believe how fast time. Yeah,
Is it going?
I only asked 4 questions. So
Wait, can I drop this one thing here?
please,
Okay. So one
yes.
of my mentors, I don't call everybody mentor. There are
Hmm.
probably about two people in my life that I'm like, you're my mentor, people I lean to. But one of my mentors, she used to always say, and it's a scripture in
Yes.
Ecclesiastes, it says that those who are in the land of the living still have hope, for a live dog is better than a dead lion.
Mm.
And I've leaned she introduced that scripture to me when I was in college, and I've leaned into that so much. And when you get into the biblical breakdown of like the representation of the dog versus the lion in biblical text, what it essentially is saying is that a dog is like the derelict of society in the animal
Yes.
kingdom, particularly in the biblical times. I mean, I know we
Mhm.
see them as our companions now, but
Mhm.
back then they're like, you return to your own
Mhm.
vomit and lick the wounds of the
Yeah.
leper. A lion is victorious. Jesus was
Yeah.
called the Lion of Judah. And here, the scripture is very clear that if you have life, if you have breath in your body, there is purpose in your being. And it would be better for you to crawl as a derelict in
Mhm.
society than succumb to death. So
Mhm.
that is to whoever may be
Mhm.
listening
Mhm.
that needs to hear that encouragement. You feel like you're on your last leg, as long as you can feel it and you got a last leg, keep pushing.
Shake the leg and
Keep
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 going.
going. Keep going.
Yes, you have encouraged I feel in my soul you have encouraged someone.
Bless
You
God.
have encouraged someone. And with that, as you share, one of the focus of your legacy is that someone would say, because you were here,
Mhm.
why is being connected
Mm.
to others and intentionally supporting, helping, taking care of one another. Why is collaboration and connection so vitally important right now for us as a people, um, for us as leaders? Why is staying connected so important?
It's a complete falsehood and a trick of the enemy for anyone to believe they can do it on their own. And I'm saying that as someone who is like, I will put a chair on my back and carry it up the steps by my tripping over my pant leg before I ask somebody to help me. And
Mm,
you can survive like that. It is
mm-mm,
a trick of the adversary to have people think that we can be these individual beings. God created
mm,
us in community. He created humanity. He created the world
mm.
in collaboration. Let
Yes.
us make man in our own after our
Mhm,
own image and in our own image and after our own likeness. He
mhm,
created that. And it is, we are gregarious creatures. Even the person who was like, I like to be alone and I enjoy my own company. I
mhm.
do too sometimes. And at the end of the day, fulfillment comes through interaction and engagement. And in times of turmoil, it literally is the only way we're going to survive.
Mhm, mhm. When you think about, and you wrote this question, how does our ability to appreciate humanity in others shape our communities and the way we engage in the world? I think it's now us recognizing I can't do this alone. But when we then appreciate humanity, and how when we are actually appreciating that in others, how does that then help us to activate this collective called community?
So I think it gives us the strength.
Okay.
And I say that because once I can see me in someone else, it gives me the ability to speak to the things that be not as though they were.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
helps me to potentially help another individual bring to bear a strength that I may need.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives us the chance to recognize that no one has to have all the answers, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you have one portion of the puzzle and I have a piece of the puzzle, then we can create the picture. But if I can never see that someone else can hold a puzzle piece, then I'll walk around with my little piece completely incomplete.
Yeah.
And I think that it is a necessity to life
Mm-hmm.
to recognize that we are literally one.
Yes.
And there's vulnerability in that, there's risk in that, there's
Accountability in that.
accountability in that. But even that word accountability is a little shaky sometimes because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we throw it around and we weaponize it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But really, accountability is like, I'm only responsible for me. I can't make
Mm-hmm.
you call into question the thing you don't
Mm-hmm.
want to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can acknowledge that there are things I don't want to acknowledge,
Mm-hmm.
then when I see that hesitation in someone else, it gives me more compassion. And then it's through that compassion that people are often more willing to share their vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm vulnerable to you, you become
Yeah.
more vulnerable to me.
I've been wrestling with the word grace
Mhm.
with other human beings.
Mhm.
and recognizing, especially in times of constant change, transition, the element of grace and being able to recognize that this person is probably doing the best that they can in this moment.
Hmm.
And how can I show up with grace but also boundaries?
I struggle with that too.
Okay.
I do. And you said something. They're probably doing the best that they can in this moment. And what I've also said is that, and they may not be,
Mhm.
but it's not my responsibility or
Mhm.
decision to make them choose.
Mhm.
What I can do though, and I've had this conversation with friends, is that set your boundaries and
Yes.
recognize that no one is responsible for upholding your boundaries. We uphold our own.
Yes.
Teach people how to treat you.
Yes.
But when you put those boundaries in place, what it might inadvertently do is make you more separate.
Mhm.
Sometimes we use it as a way to think it's going to bring the other person in, when in reality, it might be the barrier that keeps them out.
Right.
So grace is a measure that we always have to extend, even when we don't think folks are deserving of it,
Mhm.
because God extends it to us.
Mhm.
And I'm saying that as someone who is like, no, you know exactly
I've
what
been
you
wrestling.
did.
I've been wrestling with that word.
You know exactly why you did what you did. And I'm going to tell you why you did it, even if you don't want to acknowledge it. But then I get back to it, and God's like, but that's not your job.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
I'm the
Mhm.
one who
Mhm.
brings them into
Mhm.
enlightenment. One
Mhm.
waters, one man plants the seed, one man waters, but God is the one who gives the increase, the revelation, the illumination, and the truth telling.
Mhm.
And just like
Mhm.
you don't want nobody else to tell your truth, don't you go meddling in other people's business. So that's how I wrestle with
Mm.
that. But
Mhm.
I mean, I do. I'm there with you too. Like, no, you
Mhm.
you you did it. You know why you did it.
Mhm.
You deserve what comes to you for that. And then I get checked.
Yes, you get
I
checked.
get checked.
Yeah. There's so much. There's so much. So we are literally at the last 4 minutes.
No.
No, I told
You
you.
said
I
that.
told
You
you.
said
I told
that.
you. She said, "Oh, I don't know." I was like, "Look, everyone says, oh my goodness, it's over
It's
already."
over
Yes, it is
already.
over already. But there are two things I would love for you.
Mhm.
I always ask the experts that sit in that chair to actually speak to. I can't tell you how many times I've had people share with me. Someone shared your podcast with me right when I needed it.
Mm.
I had shared with the Find Your Strength team that I was speaking to a room of nurses, and a nurse, I had no idea of who she was,
Mhm.
but someone had shared the podcast with her while she was literally trying to navigate the aftermath of the pandemic. And she said, I listened to that podcast every single week, and it just kept giving me what I needed to keep coming back to the hospital.
Mhm.
And so I want you to allow the Lord to use you, and I want you to think about the person who's actually feeling stuck right now. Um, they have a pattern of shame or fear, self-doubt. What are 3 things you would want to share with them today to help them start that journey towards heart work?
Mm. So the first thing I would say, and I had to come into an understanding of this for myself, you are not more powerful than God.
Mm.
You don't even have the strength or the capacity to mess up what it is he's called you into being. Number one. And because it is by grace that we are saved and not of works, it is a gift of God. Like it, lest any man should boast. And I know I'm chopping the scripture up,
Mhm.
but the intention behind that is that it is not by our own doing or our own merit that we have come into this alignment with the Lord. We don't get the ability to mess it up. Now, there are consequences to actions, but the grace of God will take us through it. So, the first thing I would share with an individual who feels like I've gone too far, no, you have not.
Mm.
And the fact that you can even conceptualize a thought about any level of measure of being separated from the Lord tells you that you're still in alignment with Him. Just
Mhm.
turn around.
Mhm.
The second thing is that every part of our lives, if we believe that we're crafted in purpose, then everything has meaning.
Mhm.
Even the things about us that feel like the hardships reminds me of the book of Job, right? And all that Job experienced, right? It took him going through all of those different things to bring him back into alignment with who he already was.
Mhm.
But he had to understand who he was as God called him to it, not
Mhm.
by your own merit. And so I would say, turn to the Lord as quickly as you can. You don't have the power to mess up your own gift, and know that God has created and crafted you with purpose. And what you're experiencing now is a part of the journey to becoming
Yes.
what you already are,
Yeah.
because we exist in the being. We just have to come into alignment with it.
Ah, thank you. Thank you for your yes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing so many layers of authenticity and transparency and just foundational truth. Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Soror.
Thank
Oh,
you. Thank you
this
for the
has been so
invitation.
amazing. And I know people are like, well, I want to be connected to this wisdom all the time. So, can you please share with the people what is on the horizon for
Oh,
Dr. Jubilee?
it sounds so crazy to
We
me.
got new, we got news, y'all.
So
That's
I,
right.
I said I'm going to share this as an accountability measure. So I'm exercising vulnerability right now. So I have been working on a book for some time, and it is a book of idioms and colloquialisms that have been shared, points of wisdom from people in my village that have been shared with me throughout my life that have shaped literally who I am.
Yeah.
So some of them you heard a little bit today, but I've put pen to paper. Last year I started, and then I took a break because of procrastination and all the things. Like that's why I can
True.
say,
Yes.
where it is. But the Lord has been pressing on me to get this out, and it is not my responsibility to determine what happens with it. I just need to birth the
Mhm.
baby. So the
Yes.
book is going to be. It's kind of moving into a devotional,
Yeah.
but it really is like the soul wisdom that has created
Mhm.
the entity that is me.
Yeah.
And the way it is divided, it is about 16. I think I'm locking in on 16,
Mhm.
maybe 21. We'll
Look,
see.
we got news, y'all.
Right. I might, but it's, the structure is I offer the idiom or the
Mhm.
phrase of wisdom. I talk a little bit about how it was introduced to me. So you get to hear about me, about the folks in my village, and then I connect it to the message. Like, what have I extracted from it? How does it align with scripture? Sometimes how does scripture debunk what that teaching was trying to
Mhm.
instill? And then I close it out with some reflective questions and then a closing prayer. So I think it's going to be a devotional. I'm not quite sure what to call it just yet, but somewhere in the title is going to be about soul to soul, wisdom shared, the journey to Jubilee, all of the things that created me. And
Yes.
I'm going to put it out
I'm so excited this year.
this year.
Yes,
This
it's
year.
coming, and I've already booked y'all the comeback for the launch. So
Yes.
yes, so we are going to
Yes.
create the and next part two is the episode to the launch. So I'm so excited for you,
Thank you.
Sora.
Thank
So
you.
excited. All right, y'all. So as I've said, literally all year to this point, that in 2025, I want every single episode to be one in which you are able to hear, regardless of chaos, of change, of uncertainty, or transition, how can you remain stable even when you aren't feeling like it? But how can you find a space of stability to remain purposeful in who you have been called to be?
Mm.
That this moment does not define who you are or what you are able to be. But I want this year, 2025, every episode to be one that has nuggets, treasures, guidance, tips, and tools for how do I, regardless of what any other thing that's happening, how do I remain true
Mhm.
to who I've been called to be?
Mm.
And so I feel soar. Dr.
Yes.
Jubilee, that you have continued that journey for us
Thank you.
in
I'm glad.
so many ways, so many
Mm.
ways. So, if you want to continue this journey with us, same time, same place, next week, right here on the flip side. We'll see you then.